I always think that if I can be an author, anyone can be an author. And that's, as a teacher as well, teaching to children, I say to them, you can be whatever you want to be. And when I said to them, you can be an author, I can actually say, well, I'm an author now, because if I can do it, then anyone can do it, basically.
So today we're here with Simon Hunt, and Simon Hunt is a published author, published children's author. So I thought I'd have a conversation with him about writing, the creative process, but I'll let him introduce himself. Simon, tell me a bit more about yourself, please.
So my name is Mr. Hunt, because I say Mr. Hunt because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm a primary school teacher. So that's my teacher name. I teach year 4 just outside Manchester. But my human name, because some teachers have real life human names as well, is Simon. And on the other 2 days, so like I said, I've written a couple of books. I go to schools each week all around the country, and I work with different educational companies, and I've kind of fallen into that side of what I do, because originally I thought that when you become a teacher, you're a teacher, deputy, head, retire, die. That's what I thought my path was going to be. But I've accidentally fallen into these other things within education, and because of teaching, mainly because of the kids that I teach, and from conversations, and I'll talk about why I've written a book a little bit later on. From one conversation I had at 3:15 4 years ago is now the reason
Wow.
why I've written 2 books, and why I go to schools every single week.
That's really fascinating. I found you on LinkedIn, and when I saw that you were at a school, you reading one of your books, and I thought, well, how fascinating is that? And it's such a different experience compared to anything else. Reading one of your books to your primary audience who are kids. And what was that like? And I'll ask you that before I ask you about where your journey started.
Yeah, what's funny is that and what I still sort of I pinch myself sometimes that when I go to schools, I have children giggling and laughing, and teachers
Yeah.
laughing at the side and stuff,
Yeah.
because of something, just a little idea I had a few years ago in this room here, that I written down on a post-it note just here. And because of my daughter, which we'll talk about later on, that's from that I've now been to different places all around the country. I was in Bromsgrove last week. I had a Zoom to 100 children in Ukraine last year, and
Wow.
we had to pause halfway through because there was a siren going on. World Book Day 2 years ago, I had 400 children from Kathmandu on a live Zoom,
Wow.
and I read it to them, and they still laughed at the same parts. They still giggled at the same parts, and I still pitch myself, like I said, that just a little idea I had in here, and I'm able to sort of get children laughing, and parents. And I know sometimes I've had parents and like pictures of them reading my book at bedtime, which is a really special time. I'm going to do that in about 2 hours time as well with my own children,
That is
to be
special
part
time.
of that. And it exists now. That book exists. No, they both exist, and they're both around and circulating. And it's just yeah. And I always think that if I can be an author, anyone can be an author. And that's, as a teacher as well, teaching to children, I say to them, you can be whatever you want to be. And when I said to them, you can be an author, I can actually say, well, I'm an author now, because if I can do it, then anyone can do it, basically.
So I guess my first question to you, Simon, was then tell me about the journey. What made you become a writer? How did you decide at some point to pen a book, and where did your creativity come from?
I think it was 2 very specific points. I'm going to do the most recent one first, and then the one that goes back a bit further. So the first one is about 4 years ago. We had all the children were ready to go at the end of the day, and we've kind of all got bags and coats ready to go. And there's that 5 minutes of when you just have these random conversations with your class because you're waiting for the bell to go and the children to go home.
Yeah.
And we were talking about what we're to be when we're older. And one of the children said to me, she put her hand up and she said, "Mr. Hunt, what do you want to be when you're older?" Which I thought was a really interesting, quite a deep question, really.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, and I said, actually, there is things I want to do. And I said, right, I still want to, I'd love to write a book one day. It's something I've always fancied doing, but I've never got around to it. So she said, well, Mr. Hunt, you're always telling us we can be illustrators, engineers, scientists, authors, all these different types of things. If you're telling us this, then why don't you try to become an author too? So then I thought, well, I can't really go, no, but then ask them the same question to them the next day and expect them to do it. So I thought, right, I'm going to I said, right, I'm going to try to write a book, and I might need your help. And that's what I'm going to do. So I got back home and I was reading with my daughter, she was 3 at the time, no, 4 at the time. And we're reading one of the, I think it was like a Horrid Henry story or something like
Oh
that. Because
yeah,
she loves really silly and disgusting stories.
Because it dips into their imagination. They imagine what you're reading, and they conceptualize it in the mind's eye, as it were, and it's such a enjoyable process for them.
It is, and she was giggling. But as I read it, and I read another book and another book, I realized that most of the books that we read that she giggles at are the boys, or the main characters are a boy. There's not many out there that has a girl as the main character. So I thought, right, I've got it. I'm gonna write the book about my daughter for my daughter, because I thought I'll just write it for her. That's what it was going to be for.
So sweet.
Yeah, well, it's sweet at the moment. She still likes that she has a book about her at the moment, but I reckon I've got
Yeah.
about a year before she hates it. But so I thought, well, what does she always do? And at the time, she was always picking her nose.
Right.
Picking her nose. So I thought, right, okay, bogies. She loves bogies, right?
Yeah.
Who would you least expect to pick a nose? A princess, right? I'm going to
Yeah.
call it the bogey, right? Delilah Rose, a bogey princess. So I thought,
No.
Delilah was a bogey princess. So that's where it started from. And then what I did is I said to her, and I said, Delilah, what are your favorite bogies? And she said, I love the really sticky ones. I love.
Oh, so you had that conversation with her.
Literally had it was very well researched, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
so I started from there. And when I teach poetry at school, and you're as an English teacher, it's one of the things that you have teachers that love teaching poetry are the ones that like, oh, I don't like poetry. I'll stick a week unit in just before we finish because I've got to do poetry. And children, they notice that. They can see if you're not into poetry, if you're not passionate about it, they'll spot that. So I always teach a ones poem, and just a particular theme, put the word ones in it, so you could talk about friends. So kind ones, friendly ones, those that are there.
Oh, I like that. That's a nice little form of poetry there.
And it fits with anything. So teachers, loud ones, quiet ones, always drinking coffee ones, shouty ones, stompy ones, a bit too tall ones, things like that. So I started that off with about bogies, and I did a bogey poem.
No.
And then I took the bogey poetry, the different types of bogies, and I did a little narrative at the beginning and at the end. And throughout the story, I mean, and when I go to schools, I talk about this. All the clothes within the story, the colors are all Delilah's, her dress. So she's got the dress that's in the story. The illustration of her bedroom is what her bedroom looked at the time. So they're these little secrets thing. And I tell them that authors do this all the time and illustrators do. They have little secrets. And sometimes you might find out about them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you never know. And it was just really nice. And then when it was sort of ready, I had an illustrator, really good illustrator, because I wanted it to become, because it's a picture book for children.
Yeah.
I got in contact with an illustrator, and she loved the idea because her daughter Amelie is the same age as Delilah, picked her nose and did the same thing. So I thought, right, I've got an idea here. I've got I think I've got a book here. So it became a real book, and then it was on computer. But then I always tell children that poems should be read aloud, books should be. So I looked into it, and then I mean, I had help from other people, but eventually it became a real life book, and now I've sold like 6,000 copies. And I've gone to schools every single week. I've gone up to Newcastle, London, all different places. Like I said, Zoomed, Kathmandu. I get sales randomly from Amazon that you can see it popping off. And then I've toured. I've gone to schools every week for the past 3 years. And then I've just finished my second book, which is that one there. And it's a similar thing. I'm now going to schools talking about it. But what I feel that when I go to a school, I don't just read the story. So I'll show the story. I'll read the story to them first, but then I'll show them in little choices I had to make around the story. So I showed them the text that didn't make the book. I showed them like I did a plan of when I was going to write, plan, edit, improve. Basically, what we ask children to do all the time.
The creative process, the drafting process.
How it's exactly the same as what my children do in year 3, year 4, and when I speak to younger children. Yeah. And I show them even little things like the size of the font that I had to choose, where where the layout, where it's going to go. How I had to choose. I had 6 covers I had to choose from at the end, and then what I did was when I had to choose those 6 covers with my class, I just gave them to my class. I said, right, you guys tell me which ones you really, really like. And they said, well, we like this one, Mr. And they're quite brutal, actually. Like 7, 8-year-olds can be quite. I kind of did that, and they're like, Mr. This is really good. Oh, that's we don't like that bit, and that's why in the start of the first book there, I say I give thanks to all the children that I've taught, because I basically I did what I asked them to do every single week, write short stories, and then I've done the same thing. And then the nice thing is that when I go to schools, I can, like I said, my handwriting's terrible, and so is my spelling, really. And
Yeah.
but I can still be an author. So that's like the recent one. The one going back before then is in year 6.
When you were in year 6.
Yeah, when I was in year 6. So year 1,
Yeah.
year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5.
Yeah.
I wasn't confident at all. I was very, very shy in class. Well behaved, academically okay, but one of those children that just could go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And then I was then a teacher in year 6 called Mrs. Parker, a very creative teacher. It just did things differently. She spotted that I had a bit of creativity with me, and
yeah.
it was because of her that I enjoyed reading and writing, because until then I struggled with it. I had a creative side, but I was just not really spotted. I just went unnoticed. But then she was the first one to spot me. And what was really nice was that I talk about her in like schools that I've been to, and I show my year 6 picture as well.
Yeah, are you still in touch with her? Have you told her that she's been part of
Yeah,
that
I
journey?
have now. So
Good.
3 years ago, I was on a radio interview in Manchester talking about her, and she heard me talking about her on the radio, and then
Yeah.
she found me, got in contact with me, and sent me, and now she
Aw.
sends me Christmas cards, and I'm back in
Oh,
contact.
that's
And she's
brilliant.
the reason as well why I became a teacher. She's the main reason why I became a
Yeah.
teacher. Like everyone has, I'm sure you've got this amazing
I've got,
teacher.
I've got this amazing teacher out there that
You'll know his
inspired me to
name
go-
straight
yeah, that's
away.
right.
Yeah, so that's kind of where my writing journey started. And then from that, I mean, I've written a second book. And then strangely enough, linking back to Horrid Henry, 3 weeks ago, I was in Buckingham Palace because I was attending the 500 Words BBC ceremony, because I was part of that and created some content. Sat next to Francesca Simon, who's the author of Horrid Henry.
wow.
It's like come full circle. And
Did you tell her like you inspired me?
there's a picture, I don't know, I think
You're gonna send it to me. I'm gonna try and incorporate it into this video.
I'm going to send a picture of me and Francesca, and then while we was in Buckingham Palace, and I remember I had a cup of tea with Tom Hiddleston, which is the most surreal thing. That did happen 3.5 weeks ago. I had a cup of tea.
Isn't that the actor for Loki?
Yeah. He was stood
Wow.
next to me, and I had a cup of tea, and he wouldn't allow cameras inside, but he
Yeah.
signed a little message from my wife and said, "To Charlotte," and he did a little message for her. So yeah, that's
Wow,
that's all
brilliant.
because I have a little conversation with my class that are aged 7 and 8 about what do you want to be when you're older. So it's all kind of gone from there. So really, the reason why I become an author is because of my class.
I'm exactly the same. My students encouraged me to go, "Sir, you should write a book." Forget that. A few years before I wrote this book, I had a little conversation with my class about music. I'm like, "Guys, we're in Qatar. Isn't it a shame that there's no songs that celebrate Qatar?" And they were like, "Yes, there is a chance. You know what? Why don't we pen a song together as a class, just for a laugh, and we'll just see where it goes." So we took Camila Cabello's Havana, and we changed the lyrics to make it about Qatar. Qatar is a place in Qatar, and yes, Havana, oh, Nana, right? So we got a singer on Fiverr to sing it for us, and we were, the class was in stitches, like, so this is so cool. So fast forward 2 years later, I wrote another song by the Chainsmokers, We're in Ever Leaving Doha, right? Put it online, went to sleep, woke up. The Qatar's royal family had reposted that song, right? And it went viral, right? I had no idea. I was heading to work. I had my suit on, heading to work, and I saw the notification. What's going on? And a member of the royal family had sent me a direct message, and I'd ignored it for a couple of hours, completely unaware, because I didn't see it. It's in the requests tab, right? So only in the afternoon, I said, "Oh my goodness, I've ignored a member of the royal family and not replied." And so I replied as "Hi, Your Excellency, I'm grateful for this retweet," and they actually invited me to perform some of the songs at a private concert. Fast forward 2 years after that, the song I wrote with my class again for the World Cup, right, unofficially became the theme song all around Qatar. And the really cool part is we took Shakira's Waka Waka song, but we made it about Qatar, right? And it got catchy, it went viral. It was played in the malls, played in the trains, but there's a part in the song which was Doha, and that's the school choir, right? I said, "Guys, I need your voices. I can't replicate digitally 100 kids. You're all gonna sing it." So they all sang it, right? That same audio was played in the malls, played in the boulevards, played everywhere during the World Cup, right? And it all can be traced down to a conversation I had with my class. "Hey guys, why don't we write something together?" And so the book, again, also, they were my first test audience. I said, guys, before I want to know if it's any good. You guys are teenagers, and as a teacher, the avid readers. The avid reader, I'm going to give you a copy of a couple of chapters. Tell me what you honestly think. Is this worth pursuing, or is it just completely, I stick to my day job? So they read it. They go, sir, it's good. I said, really? They go, yeah. If it's terrible, we'll tell you, just like your dress sense. I'm like, thank you. Okay. So they don't hold back, right? So, and they encouraged me. And because of them, I thought if young kids like this, then at least it's got some traction. So that's why I put it through to a few publishers, and I put it through to the company that you suggested as well. And it's now going places, all because of the young people encouraging it. So I know there's a lot to that our older generation have to say about the younger generation, but honestly, they can also be very inspiring.
And they've seen that happen as well. They've seen that you get to that point, and they've seen that. So that when they become adults and when they're older, they might be inspired by the fact that they've actually seen this happen in real time.
Exactly right. Why should we give them examples of Steve Jobs and all these prolific people? We can say no. We are, as educators and teachers, we should be role models. We can't say, oh well, be like Steve Jobs. No, how about we do something that's daring and inspiring to encourage the young learners in front of us? Because teaching isn't just teaching the subject, but it's in a way linked to mentoring and coaching, because that's what you are. You are them. I've got some students in Qatar that I've mentored for over 10 years, and I've seen them go from school to high school to university to the world of work, and I've always been a mentor and a guide to them. And young people need that, because in the absence of that kind of mentorship, I know you teach the very, very younger children, but as they get older, in the absence of that mentorship that we either provide or don't provide, a young person is going to turn to what? The mobile phone. And that's not fit for purpose, because there's, advocates for older people, would get up 5 a.m., go to the gym, go for a run. That's not for a teenager, that's not advice, and it's not filtered either. So what we don't want is a younger generation turning to, these social media influencers for advice. No, we have a duty of care and responsibility to give them that guidance and mentorship. Look at the pivotal role that your primary school teacher played in you now becoming an author. And just by that little bit of encouragement, it can go such a long way. And I think as educators, that's our responsibility, whether we like it or not.
I know, and I know that it's not just me. She taught how many, 20 years, 30 years, 30 children every single year. There was not just me that'd be like that. There'd be loads of other children that she's taught. And I always try to, when I became a teacher, I thought, well, I just want to be somebody's Mrs. Parker.
Yeah.
That was my
Exactly.
sort of aspirations. I want to be maybe that teacher that when a child maybe is older, that they maybe struggle with school, but I maybe planted that seed of like creativity or want to do something, and then it gets nurtured and watered as they get older. But that started, in my class, or they enjoyed being in my class. And like you said, it's all about relations. For me, it's always about relationships and nurturing. And I always, with writing especially, because a lot of boys struggle with writing in primary school.
Yes.
But there's not many male primary school teachers. So when they see, for some of the boys in my class, they see a male primary school teacher that they would look up to, hopefully.
Of course. Yeah.
Who's an author, who enjoys writing, then hopefully it will come to them as well. But yeah, I just find it's just the whole nurturing side of it. And if as a teacher, if you tell them to write, like, I want you to write this, they'll write it, and they'll go, how many lines do I have to write, usually in primary school? But if you get them to want to write, they'll write for themselves. They'll always produce better writing because they're writing for themselves, not just because they have to. And that's kind of what I always want to do. I want the children to write for themselves because they want to, not because they have to. And you'll always get better writing if you do that.
No, I completely agree. And I think you're so fortunate to be able to have contacted your teacher. I know it was through the radio, but because my primary school teacher, her name was Miss Orr. Miss Orr was this country, she grew up in the countryside, so she was very, 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 very relaxed and laid back. She was elderly back then, and she told me, "Oh, you write very well," and that stuck with me, And I wish I could tell her all these years down the line, like, Miss, I would still call her Miss. Like, Miss, I wrote a book, thank you for telling me that I write well, because those things as a child, they stick with you, they really, really do, and like positive encouragement goes such a long way.
Like you. And if you ever speak to anybody, whether they're in teaching or not, you'll ask them who is their favorite teacher. Every single person will have a Mrs. Parker or Mrs. Or that every single person will have that person that they could really relate to, or that really brought them out of the shell. And that's kind of that. Yeah, that's always been my sort of aspiration to be Mrs. Parker. That's always been what I've aspired to do.
That's really cool. Okay, well, look, Sam, I had a question for you, which was we talked about your journey, and you told me that it was your daughters actually that inspired you to get writing, actually, and her stories became your stories. When you're writing, what do you enjoy most about writing for children? Like, what's the fun? Is it the writing process, or is it watching? Like you said, when you're reading to them, they giggle and they're laughing. Is it watching them react to your stories, or do you enjoy the writing process?
I think it's both, because what I found when I decided to start writing, and when I do write, I just endorphins. It just makes me feel sort of happy doing it, that I'm doing something, doing something for me. Because as quite often when you're teaching or when you're doing things for other people, but when I sat down to write, I was doing it for me. And because I'm quite childish as well, I've got an immature sense of humor.
Yeah.
I was writing about bogies and bottom birds. So I mean, I was kind of giggling to myself, like, as I was writing.
I've done that. When I wrote some of my funny chapters, I'm like, and the kids were like, "Sir, you okay?" No, I just wrote a funny sentence, and wait till you see it in the book, and they're like, "Sir, you okay?"
That's the thing. And then for me, it's going into schools and just seeing people giggle. And then because I was in last Friday, where did I go last Friday? I was near Blackburn, so in a school near Blackburn, and I had like upper key stage 2, so I had about 100 children, and I was reading, I was pausing at certain bits, and the whole room was giggling because of something I'd written in here, because of the second book there last year. And so it's just really, and like I said, when I've read to children in Kathmandu, completely different, English is additional language, but they still at the same beats.
They found the same parts funny.
Yeah, they still found the same thing.
For you, I agree. I love watching people react to the things I've made. For me, that's such a fun aspect. And you can't put a price on that. All the hard work and editing you put in is all about that reaction, watching people react to what you've created, like you say, in your little room. And I remember when I was doing my A-levels, I met, it's a little bit off topic, but it's not, because I know you've said a few times, I wrote this in this little room. When I was doing my A-levels, we were taken on a trip, and we met Dyson, the man who invented the Dyson Hoover. We met the man himself, right? Back then, he'd only invented the vacuum cleaner. He hadn't invented the hairdryer and the fan. None of that existed. And we met him, right? And he told us, "You're like, all right, kids, so listen, I decided in my kitchen, on my counter, to fix the problem of suction being lost to vacuum cleaners." So I took apart my vacuum cleaner right there on my kitchen table, and right there, the first Dyson prototype was created, right on my little dingy kitchen table. And look where we are now. And so I think there's a lot to say for having a small little location where you're putting something together creatively, and it makes it more memorable for you as well. The fact that he remembered his kitchen top, and you remember that you went from penning your book in your room. I can only see a rectangle in your room. Cool lava lamp, by the way. From penning your book in your room to being sat next to Tom Hiddleston and sharing a cup of tea with him, and how surreal is that?
It was very sweet. And the thing with my writing journey is I've kind of fell into it organically.
That's the best way.
And I had no, and I do have imposter syndrome. I really do. So I'm a writer, but I also do teach a CPD and go to schools. I've been to, like, a couple of years ago, I
recognize your imposter syndrome from CP. I'm doing my NPQSL, and that phrase of imposter syndrome is
I need that. I think I like that, because I think that keeps me on my toes.
Yeah,
and for me, it works for me. So I've just decided to be the best imposter I can be. That's kind of what I've decided to do.
What is it? What's that quote from James Bond? You're smarter than you look. Well, it's better than looking smarter than you are.
You're cleverer than you look. Still better than looking cleverer than you are. Follow me, please.
I believe in looking smarter than you are, right? Because we always, when do you never feel like an imposter? I remember this summer, I think, I went to this convention, and Jacqueline Wilson was there, very elderly lady, right? And it was this summer, so COVID hadn't entirely gone. So when I saw her, she was wearing a face shield and she was behind the screen. And I just went up to her and I was like, "Hi, Jacqueline, I don't have a book to sign. I just wanted to say thank you for your contribution to children's literature. As an English teacher, I want to tell you that you have touched the lives of so many young people. And I grew up watching Tracy Beaker, so just wanted to say thank you." And she gave me a nod of approval, a nod of acknowledgement, and that was enough for me. I was like, I just wanted to say that. So I'm sure your kids thank you when you read them the books, and they don't thank you verbally because they're kids, but you see that gratitude on their faces, and that's very special, isn't it?
The biggest thanks I have is a little giggle, a little smile with some children when they walk in, and what I found really quite rewarding is that when I get to the year 5s and 6s, so the slightly older ones, I always say I'm going to read about bottom breadths. They're all a bit like, really, but by the end they're laughing and giggling and getting involved, and I've kind of switched it around, and then I show the writing process, which they really relate to and stuff, and they find quite interesting because it's not something they often see that side of it. They just see the finished product, not the work that went in beforehand.
I think that's really important, because getting kids to write creatively, it's an art form. It's like getting a chunk of ice and chipping away at it slowly. You're not going to get that iced unicorn straight away. It takes time, and it takes polishing, takes it's a fine art, and it's a crafting process involved. And I think it's great for them to see even a writer such as yourself. You're not exempt from that process of planning and drafting and redrafting and editing and tossing a page aside. When I was doing war poetry with year 8s last year, we found Wilfred Owen's, one of his drafts of his poems, and you see words that he's crossed out. And I'm like, guys, look at the difference. That word almost made it into the poem. Wouldn't it have made that poem entirely different? And look at the final product. Which one do we appreciate? And they just appreciate the editing process that Owen went through. So I think it's really important for them to see that.
And it's funny you say that. Like when I go to schools, I have a screenshot of a page of me crossing things out, that I'm circling things and scribbling this, and I think there's a bit where I had to check whether the word, so because that's like a nautical book sort of, because it's sort of pirate, whether the word mainsail, do you know when you hear about the mainsail, is that one word or two? And I found out it's one word because it's a nautical word. I didn't know that before. I had to look that up, so I had to find out, and I had to check certain things. And it's I think it's good for them to see that, even
as adult, we don't
hard work as well. And
we don't know everything. We've got to double check.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
Okay, well, my next question was, I was going to ask you, do you convey any serious messages through your books? I think it's more that your books have that ability to entertain and bring pleasure to young people. There's not some, J.B. Priestley kind of message of social awareness and responsibility, unless it's about picking your nose in public. It's more about joy, isn't it? That joy.
It is. I'd say the biggest message that I have when I speak to kids is that if I can do it, you can do it.
That's amazing.
That's my main message, because I always talk to them, like I mentioned before, my handwriting's still not great. It's something I have to really work on at school. Even now, when I'm marking books, I have to go right and really need to concentrate, otherwise it'll be scribble. And then I tell them that my handwriting's not great, but I'm still an author now, so.
But you sound just like I didn't meet the late Benjamin Zephaniah, but I teach one of his articles, and he says that my spelling isn't great, but I still write. And when I read you performing poetry, but because he's dyslexic, he struggles a bit with the reading. So he gets someone else to read it, but he goes in and he has like these reading sessions with kids. He says, just because my spelling is terrible, that hasn't hindered me in any way. I still and look how famous a writer he was. So I think it's great for them to see that. Because imagine if you went in and said, "Hi guys, I'm a published author. My handwriting's perfect, my spelling's perfect, and I wrote one draft, and you're reading it, and that's it." They'll be like, "Well, I could never do this." But if you show the complete opposite, you show them that I've got many drafts, my handwriting isn't great, but look what I've got to. Even with these challenges, I still got to where I am. And they'll be like, and then like you say, if I can do it, you can do it.
Complete, and that's what I find when I go to schools. That's my main point. That it is literally, if I can do it, then anyone can do it. And it's not as hard as you would think, because you think these authors are these people that are unattainable, but they're not. It's doable. And I hope you do it as well. I hope you sell millions of your book as well and stuff. And if it's on Amazon, and one day I might walk past the bookshelf, God, I spoke to him a couple of years ago, like on the Zoom. I'm glad he's done it.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We'll have to see about that.
Well, my next question for you was, so a lot of my students, when I would do creative writing, especially even at the higher ages of Key Stage 4, ages 15 and 16, a lot of them say, sir, I'm stuck, I don't know what to write. And as a writer, I wanted to ask you, have you ever experienced writer's block? And if you have, how have you overcome that?
Gosh, writer's block. So I've always so with ideas and with writing. So what I kind of related to dreams. So when you wake up in the morning, I talk about children as well. You can remember your dream, but then like about 10 minutes later, you completely forget. But
Very
it's the
true.
same with ideas. Same with ideas. I text myself sometimes. I'll just get my phone. If I've got an idea, I'll just text something. To send it to me, otherwise I'll forget it. Or I'll post-it notes. I'll write it down on a post-it and I'll put it in my bag. Otherwise, it'll just disappear. So that's kind of how I overcome. And I'll come back to it later. And I always say to children that write for yourself first. If you write for yourself, what makes you laugh, what interests you, then if you write for yourself first, that's kind of where I would always start. And like with you're writing about yourself, so you are writing for yourself in a way. And then whatever happens with whatever you've written happens with it, whether it's a world bestseller or whether it's just you that's just read it.
I did. I wrote this actually for myself because I wanted to pen all of my stories, and if nothing else, so I have an account of it, because I won't remember all of it. Like your dreams, your memories, they slowly fade, and so I agree. If you think what you wrote is good, then chances are someone else will find it interesting too. Whether if you think it's not that great, then have another stab at it, because if you're not happy with it yourself, then how can you convince anyone else that it's any good? Whether it's an examiner or whether it's a young child reading your book.
Yeah, and sometimes when you say with writer's block, sometimes you just gotta just stop, go and do something else, or go for a walk, or whatever it is, or just sit back, get a coffee or a tea, and go and sit down and come back to it later. Don't force it. Don't try to force it.
I had this conversation once, but I can't remember who I had it with. It was about how the cognitive process works. Have you ever had that thing where you're sitting somewhere and you're like, oh yeah, just remembered, but you weren't thinking of that thing, which now has jumped to the forefront of your mind. But your brain has been actively working at it because you hadn't solved it before. So I find that sometimes with ideas, like you said, if you take a break from it, leave it alone, your brain will keep churning at it, and you will get through that block. But you just have to give your brain the leeway to be able to do that. But I don't know the scientific cognitive process of that links to it. I just know from experience.
I find it fascinating because it's like you said, like you'd be just then. It's like someone just got tapped on your shoulder and go, "Oh, what about this bit?" And you're like, "Oh, yeah." It's kind of sort of it's really weird how the brain is a fascinating thing, but how it does like just pop into things. I forget things and stuff all the time, and then do you know when you know the answer for something? Because we did a quiz the other day, a quiz.
Yeah.
I knew the answer for something. I thought, why do I not know something that I know I definitely know? And then I was pushing my teeth later on, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, yeah, it's that. And then it just
the brain is working at it.
Yeah. Without me knowing for the past hour, my brain's gone. I'm going to find that for you before you go to sleep. And that's kind of what happened.
I know that I think it was Stephen King that said a good idea, never write an idea down, because if it's a good idea, it'll resurface. However, I don't trust my brain to let it resurface, so I write it down. I'm sorry, Stephen King, but if it's a good idea, I write it down, because I don't trust my brain with the multi-modal world in which we live. I don't trust it to remember it and to allow it to resurface. It's just gonna disappear. So I write it down.
The same here, because my brain's very much like I get sidetracked and get distracted by things, and I'll just go like, oh, shiny thing, I'll just go over there and I'll forget this. So if I don't write it down, if I don't do something, I will forget it.
My next question to you was, I know that you said that you got a lot of inspiration from your daughter, but when I wrote, I took a lot of inspiration from my childhood. Was there anything from your own childhood that you took, or was it all from your daughter?
It was I remember just being lost in books, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to sort of recreate that, being lost in something. Like the first book I remember really being, there's a couple actually. The first one was The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton, and I'm actually reading that to my class at the moment. And the
Wow.
second one I remember really being lost. It's different to these, but was The Witches by Roald Dahl. I remember it being like
Oh,
scaring me.
yeah.
I remember being a bit scared by it, but
Which was terrifying because you wonder if those square feet really exist, and if the wigs come off. And I love the fact that your book's illustrated because it reminds me of Quentin Blake's illustrations for Roald Dahl. And I remember as a kid, we have a reading lesson every once a week where we take the students to the school library. And one of the kids just picked up, I mean, he was a smart boy, he just wanted to have a little bit of a laugh. So he was reading The Twits, right? I said, give me that, give me a look at it. And I scrolled by to the end of the book, right? Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read The Twits, but that's a travesty if you haven't, right? But you know the part, right, where the end, where they glue themselves upside down and they keep shrinking until they become entirely flat. I remember the drawings being that really detailed, and you see the shrinking process. But actually, when I looked at it again, there's a couple of illustrations. That's about it. And my mind had drew what was missing in between, And so when I was like, wow, I don't remember it being so limited. I remember there being more drawings, but my mind had drawn in the gaps. So
Quentin penciled the outline and your brain colored it in. That's kind
Yeah.
of what he did.
I think that's really cool. And I didn't mean to ask you actually, where did you draw inspiration from as a writer? Not just, what writers and what characters inspired you the most? Was that it? Was that The Witches?
Yeah, I'd say just being like this. Like for me, I love the smell of books. Like I'm sure you're
Yeah.
exactly the same. There's a
Yeah.
certain. Do you know what? I know this is a side hustle I'm thinking of doing. If anyone could invent perfume or aftershave that smells like books, you could make millions there. I'm thinking there'd be lots of people. I'd buy it if I could buy after an aftershave that smells like the inside of a book. I'd buy it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd bottle that though. I know a couple of being in Qatar, perfume's quite a big thing here, and there's a shop where you can go and literally make your own fragrance. But I don't know how they would. I guess they'd have to melt down some old books and capture the.
There's a definite Dragon's Den gap in the market there, because if someone did it, then I think it would do very, very well.
I used to love when yeah, we should. When I was doing my master's, actually, I used to love going to Senate House Library, Senate House Library in London, and I used to walk up to the academic section and just walk through the aisles of the books. And some of those books are really, really old and musky, and I just loved the smell of old books. It was insane. It was something else. You felt like you're transported to the past, when you smell old books. So yeah, I completely agree.
No, it's fascinating. And like when I mentioned before, when I know I name dropped Buckingham Palace, but when I was there, I got to hold Queen Victoria's version of Oliver Twist.
Oh, I'm teaching Oliver Twist right now.
Yeah, well, I held Queen Victoria's version, and you could see she doodled on the side and stuff.
No.
And then I had another book where it was a Beatrix Potter, the Peter Rabbit, the very first one that she handwritten. I mean, you had to hold these gloves and stuff, and there was security around. But to see this book and like the history behind like that story and the person that held that story, and the smells, it was just very fascinating to sort of be able to do that and hold those books.
That really is fascinating. I love the fact that you're like me. You're like a book geek. I'm a big book geek, and one of my favorite shops actually in London is called Scoob, which is books backwards, right? Scoob. It's down Tottenham Court Road. Yeah. It's down Tottenham Court Road, and I used to love going to that bookshop because I'm a big book geek actually. When it comes to that, I think we grew up in the same generation because I grew up with The Witches and The Twits and Oliver and a lot of Roald Dahl's books hugely influenced me just in terms of my imagination and storytelling. And what I loved about Dahl, which is what I love about your books as well, is that growing up, I'm a grown man now, but growing up, there's a part I remember where you're on the cusp of leaving childhood behind. You still have a grasp of it when you're 15, 16, 17. And somewhere along the way, you leave it behind. Right? Somewhere along the way, and you can no longer think like a child. It's very hard to think like a child. It's very, very. I mean, even my book, I was able to only go back as a teenager. I couldn't go back to when I was a child because I've lost that, and it's such a shame. And I love the fact that your book, through your daughter, actually, you managed to. But your daughter didn't write it, you wrote it. You managed to find that child's voice again and put it into writing. I think that's the magic of what's bottled in your book, really.
I think what helps with with me, because I teach year 4, I still read a lot of children's literature, and I'm still sort of in that world. So I kind of never, I've never kind of left, because I'm still discovering new books now, with authors that are being printed and that, that are coming out now, and I still get to share these books, and I find new books that I love. Like I've loved book by Sean Tan called The Lost Thing. It's a really nice book. It's an illustrative book, but that is a deep book actually. You can look and you can see something different each time. That's a very interesting book. So like I'm still finding new books now, but it's finding children's book because I'm teaching children.
I was surprised by David Walliams penning The Gangster Granny and some of his books because they've done really well.
Yeah, lots. I mean, he's done really like they were dramatized into the BBC as well, and lots of children love that. It's very, I think his style is very similar to Roald Dahl in a way. Like he's got a bit of similar style, and I think he used Quentin Blake for some of his illustrations as well. So it has the book as well.
I think you're going to completely take over the market with your book, and especially when. Yeah, especially because it has, one of the reasons I want to talk to you about it was that I want to create greater awareness than what's already out there, because I think all young children should read your book because it's just funny. It taps into your imagination in a way. And I'll put the links below of your Amazon book. I'll put it below so that anyone who's watching this can have a look at your book and can click ahead and buy it, because I think it's brilliant.
Do you know what? And I'd love to go to Qatar and read it. So I'm going to Jersey. I'm going to Gibraltar with it as well.
If you're ever here, you let me know. If you're ever here or you're in Dubai or whatever, you let me know, and I will for sure find a way of getting the powers that be to hopefully invite you in. And you can. My school has a primary segment, and they would love to. We love meeting authors, so yeah, you'll have to let me know.
I went to Qatar once for an hour. It was a stop off on the way to Thailand. We were flying to Thailand and we stopped at Qatar. But I mean, it's tripled, quadrupled in size since I've been there. And I mean, with the World Cup as well, I'd love to. It must have been amazing. I love football, you see. So when the World Cup, did you get to go? Obviously, your song was like related to the World Cup.
I went to
games?
I went to 3 games. I watched Brazil play. I watched Cristiano Ronaldo play for Portugal. And I watched another match. I think it was Denmark versus Tunisia. Yeah. But watching Brazil play was something else. It was like watching... I know they didn't win the World Cup, but those Brazilian players, right? Listen, those defenders are as good as the strikers. And when I mean the way the ball was passed, right, with such precision, right? And I managed to go into the wrong gate, so I ended up on the ground with the media team, right? So I was on eye level with the players, right? And they were like, "You can't be here." I said, "Well, should I go back?" To go, "You can't. The doors are closed." Well, I just stay here then. And it was I didn't have my glasses on, so I completely went to the wrong gate, right, without seeing, right? My kids make fun. They say, "Sir, like you can't see without glasses." I say, "Yeah, well, you know what? It benefits me at one point." Yeah, so the way those players passed the ball, right, was amazing. It was like watching someone play FIFA, but in real life. Normally players, they miss the pass goes, no, this was with accurate precision, right? And I watched that, and that was one of my favorite things to see. I was like, okay, I've seen the creme de la creme of footballers now. And
yellow shirts as well, the iconic
yeah,
as well.
And I was among the crowd, and everyone had yellow shirts. It was so cool. What I really liked about the World Cup in Qatar was just the camaraderie. Everybody was just getting along with each other. There was people from Qatar's normally quite quiet as a country. Okay, it's very quiet. But during the World Cup, the entire country was alive in the sense that there were people from all over the world, and you just walk through the downtown, right? You'd see German fans, you'd see Asian fans, you'd see British fans, you'd see Brazilian fans, and everyone's just enjoying football, enjoying the atmosphere. And it was and I've been in Qatar for 9 years by then, but that one period of the World Cup, right, was something else. And it was great to see so many fans coming to this country and just enjoying the sport. during the stadiums, everybody was cheering on, and there was just, we're all here because we love football, and that was really cool to see. Actually, I was grateful I was here for that, and I was grateful that, and I specifically didn't buy, apart from there's a World Cup just here next to me, just a little souvenir. I'll grab it for you actually. The only souvenirs that I got. This was the only souvenir I got. It's not the actual World Cup, right? It's just a little scale model, right? It's a replica. But I bought this because I thought it'd be a bit of fun to have. And I got one of the official footballs for it, right? But that's about it, because for me, due to my creativity as a writer, I penned a song that I celebrate all over the world. So I was like, I've got my souvenir. I'm all right. I don't need anything else. I don't need any paraphernalia or anything. I've got my souvenir already. But it was great to have. This is literally the only thing I bought during the entire World Cup. People bought shirts and caps and pins and everything. I was like, no, I've got something that I wrote, I penned, and that was all over the country, and it was on TV, it was on radio, and that was just because I, like I told you, I wrote something down with my class, and it grew arms and legs, and but it just shows. I said to my kids, guys, you know what that shows? The power of the spoken and written word. The power of the spoken word, you can get elected as US president, right? The power of the written word, you can be some very, light-hearted English teacher who's, when people meet me, they're like, you didn't write the song. I know, it's me. Just little old me, I don't have 4 arms, and I'm not 7 foot tall. I'm just a regular guy, and I wrote this little song and, put it out there. So I say to them what you say to them. If I can do it, you can do it.
That's exactly it. That's living proof of it, isn't it? And that's what you have now. You've always got that. If I can do it, you can do it, because here's an example of that, and they'll know it. I mean, that's going to stick with you for forever.
You really will.
Something you'll always remember as well. And in fact, when we get off here, I'm gonna look for it. I need to sort of find it to sort of say I met the guy that did the song there.
I'll send it to you. One of my students has written a book, but she's doing it very, very slowly. And I've encouraged her, if she can't get it published through a publisher, to self-publish. Is that something you'd advise young authors as well?
Yeah, because I looked at both routes really. So I looked at self-publishing, but I also looked at going through a publisher. And for me, there was a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and I feel like, because I'm quite lucky in a way, because with what I do outside of school, I've got quite a decent, like a good following on Facebook and on Twitter, and when I post things on there, I know I basically have free advertising really.
Yeah.
So I went through.
You've garnered the audience.
Yeah. So I went through the self-publishing route, and just to sort of give it a go, just dip my toe, because I didn't know how it was going to go. If I would have sold 10, I would have been going, great, 10 people are interested in anything that I've written. It was so 100, like amazing. But when we had I think printed originally 1,000, and they went quite quickly, and I was like, oh gosh, I was really quite surprised. And then so we got more, and then now it's still doing well. Saying it's, I think, something around about 7,000 so far. It's gone
amazing.
And
look how
Simon, you went from self-publishing to then being invited to Buckingham Palace to a reading event.
Yeah, and so the link to that is right. So the book, Delilah's book, the way I got invited, and this is all these little mini connections that can sometimes happen. I went to a school. It was an Edenhurst prep, like a prep school in the Midlands, and I went with that book. And then when I was there, I was reading it to it, and the dinner lady, the chef there, the kitchen, she made a Bogey princess cake. It was basically a green ice. So she made this. And she said, "Oh, my sister, she does stuff in like teaching and education. Can I just tell you about a book?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And she bought a copy. And then a week later, I had an email, and it was from someone called Cheryl Townsend, and she said, "Hi, I'm the head of BBC Education."
Wow.
It was her sister that was
right.
the book. So she said, my sister loved your book, and she's passed it to me. Any chance we could chat to you? And I was like, at first I was like, is this really, I get sometimes random emails. I'm like, is this really that person? So then jumped on a Zoom, and it was, and she was like, oh yes, my name's we're relaunching the 500 words competition, which I don't know whether you know, so it was to do with Chris Evans for and BBC Radio 2 for a few years. Then COVID hit, kind of stopped for 2 years.
Yeah.
But then Chris Evans went to Virgin Radio, but the intellectual property was sort of belonged to him.
Yeah.
So he gave it up and gave it back to the BBC, and they were relaunching it. And she said, "We're relaunching it. We just need consultants, advisors on it. Would you be interested in doing it?" And I was like,
Of course.
it's one of those, I either go, "Oh, I'm not too sure about this." No, I'll just go yes and worry about it later. So I said yes, okay. And then so then I helped write some of the videos that go online. So when you log on or go
Yeah.
onto the BBC website, you can look at some of the animations I've written, some of that, how to get creative, how to read back
Yeah.
to yourself, read aloud. Then they came into school and they could see how. So my school is an inclusive school for children with physical disabilities and
Brilliant.
SEN. So some of my children struggle with handwriting and spelling. So what I do with some of mine is I just get them to dictate into an iPad. It writes for them, and then we can use that.
What's the app you use for that, by the way?
So that's just literally the notes on the iPad. So accessibility tools. So yeah, that's it. That's all
Oh,
I use. So you can
just
just
that.
use.
Okay.
That's all, and it's just there. It's still their words. It still comes on the screen, and then they use
Absolutely.
that. So that's one of the videos. In fact, I sent you the link before. That's one of you can see me explaining how to do that. Another one that one of my children do on accessibility tools as well. He struggles with his attention, but there's some white noise there, so he puts headphones when he writes. It's really interesting when he writes. If he's not got anything to distract him, he's like moving around. He sort of moves
Yeah.
around a lot, can't concentrate. But we put this white noise. He likes a stream babble, but when he puts a
Oh,
stream babble on, it cuts it and it just focuses him, and then he's writing. And it's really interesting to see. And he's on one of the videos as well. So that's
wow.
all because of, again, going back, my children challenged me to write a story, going into a school, a lady that made a cake, her sister's head of BBC Education. She invited me. I said yes. Then I went to Buckingham Palace and then met the lady that kind of, so it's all full circle. There's all these little connections that can sometimes happen that, again, like dare to dream, isn't it? You know,
Dare to dream and say yes. And say yes. I mean, I love the fact that when you got the invitation from Sarah Townsend, you said yes, I'll do it. Because say yes. There's a speech that Denzel Washington done, which is don't fall back. People always say have something to fall back on. Don't fall back. Fall forward. Fall forward, okay? Because if you fall forward, that means you're trying something. And if you fall forward and you don't manage to hold yourself up, then you can get up again and try again. But the worst thing you can do is not try something. Because when you're old, you're gonna regret all the things that you didn't do. You're not gonna regret a single thing that you tried. You're like, yeah, well, I tried it. It was fine. It didn't work out. It did work out. But you will regret the things that you didn't try, the things that you didn't dare to do. No, I didn't try that. I didn't ask that question. I didn't put myself out there in that way. That's what you will regret when you're old. And
exactly.
So,
And that's why I thought I'm just going to say it. And what was really cool is that I went to meetings and did some content for it. I went to BBC in Salford, and I was in like the Match of the Day studio room once.
wow.
It was just like, this is a bit surreal. But and then what's really nice is I know lots of children have used the videos I've created to then enter and then start writing the competition. And I met one of the children that came second in the BBC competition.
Yeah.
He was saying, no, I entered because I watched your video of you talking about dictating into an iPad. That's how I entered. And that's how he
Wow.
entered it. He wouldn't have entered if it wasn't for that, but he did, because he said his spelling was terrible. He was really worried about it, but then he did enter, came second, and then he was invited to Buckingham Palace, and he got in second place in one of the like a national writing competition. So again, just those little breaking down those little barriers that sort of children sometimes put up, barriers which they say that stops them writing, and as teachers, and we can try to help remove those barriers to show that it is possible, and you can still, if you have ideas, you can be a writer. That's what I always tell my children. If you've got a good idea and you've got something to say, you can be a writer. And that's what I always tell my children.
That's brilliant. And I want to end on that because, actually, before I do, I want to ask you, what's new on the horizon for you? So you've got 2 books so far. What's next?
Right. So what's new? Right. So I really want to do a 3rd book, because that one's for like reception year 1. That one's for like 2, 3, 4. I'd love to do like one for years 5 and 6, but I've also loved to eventually do something like what you've done. I'm reading yours. I'd love to just write about, my journey into teaching, because I was quite late into teaching. I struggled at school, and just the things that happened. And I could talk to you about how I got threatened by SeaWorld a few years ago, how I've been to Brussels because of a poem that I did in Bolton.
Right.
Been to European Parliament because of a poem I did in Bolton 5, 6 years ago. I went to Seattle with Netflix. because of an English lesson. So all these things that have happened, I just feel like I need to write them down and just to say, right, like you said, just and then unlock these other memories about like where it really started, which is Mrs. Parker. And again, going back to me being in primary school, so all this kind of started there. She was the first person to plant that seed, and then now that seed's taken to all these different places. And for my career and for me, it's done. I love teaching. I know sometimes a lot of people, it's teaching is a really, really difficult job, and I see people struggling a lot.
Yeah.
And the amount of things that we're asked to do and stuff.
It's also really rewarding.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's an amazing job, and I feel privileged that I'm able to get to know 30 children every single year.
You're shaping the generation of tomorrow, and what a privilege that is. What a privilege that is, and you're nurturing the young minds, and you're inspiring young minds, and you can't do that in any other job. No. Even if it's a high paid city worker, right? And hats off to the city workers and stockbrokers, but I'm sorry to say they're not inspiring young minds. We're inspiring young minds.
And yeah, so we're teaching the children of tomorrow today, and that's kind of the way I look at it. And I don't think I could do any other job.
But I love the fact that I've, with my little amateur book, which isn't published yet, if I've inspired you in any way to pen your journey, then it would have achieved a lot. Because
I remember talking to my dad when I was 18, and I remember it was his 40th birthday. And I remember saying, "Oh, Dad," he would talk about things that he was interested in. I was like, "Oh, Dad, that's ages ago." And then now I'm now in my 40s, and I'm like where he was, and I still feel. Cause I remember him saying to me that when it was his 40th birthday, he still feels like he's 18.
Yeah.
In his mind, but I'm like now in my 40s, and I know exactly what it means. But I don't think you'll ever know that until you get to that stage in your life. So when you block off that section, so I'm sure with my son now, I'll be saying, "Oh, Hugo, when you're 40, you remember that you feel like you're 18," and then he won't know that until he gets to that sort of stage in his life.
I can relate to my thought process of when I was 18. I was like, I did that because my reason for doing that was this, and I will still probably do the same thing that I did, because that was my thought. You can trace the thought process. Some things that I did earlier on, I can't justify or trace the thought process. But I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that for? Did I actually do that? No, you did do that. Well, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I can't justify it now. So,
but it shaped you. It shaped your personality. It shaped who you are, and everything, the good, the bad, whatever you've gone through, all helps formulate and shape who you are today. So without those, without both sides, without those things, you wouldn't be who you are and where you are today if it wasn't for all those things.
And you've had such an incredible journey. My journey has been, you can't make it up. But your journey has been incredible, and I think you should pen that because, like I told you, that going back to that quote from, I know it's Doctor Who, Matt Smith. I met Matt Smith actually this summer. I met him at a convention, and he goes, "Nice suit." Okay, but Matt Smith said, I was wearing this beige blazer actually, and he goes, "Nice suit, mate. You're very well dressed. Thank you very much." He goes, "Oh, you're welcome." And he said in one of the Doctor Who episodes, he goes,
"We're all stories in the end."
And it's true, but I think the reason that biographies do so well in terms of movies, in terms of books, because no matter how creative your storytelling can be, you can't match a person's journey. That's why I realized very recently, I watched Ferrari the other day, that film. What an amazing story he had, Enzo Ferrari. I watched Ford versus Ferrari, and I was captivated. I was like, wow, what's going to happen next? Not because it's an Avengers movie, because, is it going to be this superhero is going to come? No. Because of the journey of a person's life, you can't make it up. No two stories are ever the same when it comes to people's lives. So I think those are stories worth telling. That's what I wanted to tell mine, honestly. And I tell my students, write what you know. You'll be surprised how interesting and fascinating that is. Everybody's had I'll be hard pressed to find a single person that's had a plain, mundane, boring life. They might keep everything under control, and they might keep everything level. But if you really peek beneath the surface, there's lots of struggles and challenges that they've overcome and faced, and those stories are worth telling. And I really think you should tell your story. I'll read that book. I'll read your.
That may be my next chapter. That may be my next thing I do, just to sort of,
Because I have a series planned. So I've got my boyhood, which is my teenage years, and it ends when I go to university, right? It's the last chapter. The next book is going to be called Manhood, all of my years as a man, as a teacher, and the challenges of adult life. And then the third book will be getting old, you know, how to deal with adult.
And that's not written yet.
That's not written yet. I got to get closer. I've got to get up that ladder. You know, when I start becoming senile and start forgetting things, right? I better pen that book now. You know, and I think it'd be a great trilogy.
No, everyone's got a chapter to write, a story to tell, and a chapter to write. I fully believe that, and yeah, it's good that you've inspired me to sort of think about doing that myself, and I really have been, you know, with my father-in-law who's done something similar as well, just to write it down, like you said, before it disappears, and also maybe not just necessarily for me, but for my son to read in case I maybe have these conversations, because you never know what happens in life, so maybe to write it down.
Exactly, and you know what I did? I actually sat down with my mum. My mum had these amazing stories from her childhood, right? And I sat down with her one summer, and I couldn't type it. She talks too fast, so I just voice recorded all of them. And I said, Mum, I'm gonna end up putting some of your stories into mine. So you know your stories from your dad. You can weave them in. The stories from your father-in-law, you weave them in and make them part of the narrative. Find a way of working them in. You know, you're a writer, you could do that, and that way those stories also don't get lost.